Good evening, Chatsworth. My name's William Burlington. I'm the chairman of the Chatsworth House Trust, the charity that's responsible for looking after Chatsworth for everybody. And with my wife Laura, I'm delighted to welcome you to Chatsworth tonight. We have got a remarkable array of talent in Chatsworth tonight, the like of which perhaps has not been seen before here. Although we do have plenty of our own literary connections, and if you count the books on the bookshelves, which I have not yet done, it probably gets you somewhere like 50,000, which actually, frankly, is a sort of number that you lot would probably knock out in a wet weekend. But in fact, Alan Titchmarsh on his own, I don't know. But we're delighted to be here. We're all here for one purpose, and that is the Queen's Reading Room, which has the crucial role of promoting the power of reading, not just tomorrow in the talks, but also in the outreach programme that they so effectively run, and which overlaps somewhat with ours too. It's said that Chatsworth is a place, it's more than just a house, it's a place of community and creativity and learning and inspiration. And this tonight is a great example. It's also a place to have great fun, which I'm sure you all will do to have tomorrow. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to the authors, of course, for your no doubt amazing talks tomorrow. For the Queen's Reading Room team, who've been outstanding. For our home team, who I must say have been working so hard to get it all right. So proud of everybody and what they've done. And of course, last, but by all means most, thank you, Your Majesty, for giving us this amazing opportunity.
You'll have to excuse me if my voice goes halfway through, but as you can imagine, I've been doing quite a lot of talking lately. But I'll try to hang on to it. Thank you, William, and thank you, Laura, for allowing my reading room to use the spectacular setting of Chatsworth for our third festival. It seems only fitting that in the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth, we are reminded that this magnificent backdrop was her inspiration for Pemberley in Pride and Prejudice. And who can forget the infamous scene of Mr. Darcy emerging from the lake in the BBC version? Maybe, William, we could persuade you later to reenact the scene here and emerge from the lake and to add to the excitement of the day. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's a truth universally acknowledged that books make life better. They allow us to see through another's eyes. They comfort and encourage us, make us laugh, make us cry, and free us to travel the globe without stepping outside our front doors. Moreover, scientific research by my reading room shows that books have significant benefits for both our brains and our emotions. Our aim is to unlock their transformative power to create a healthier, happier, and more connected world. A world I hope that even Lizzie Bennet would have approved of. As some of you may know, my reading room started humbly, and in the face of several naysayers, as a list of 9 of my favourite novels scribbled on a notepad during the first lockdown. It's now an online community of over 180,000, with an annual audience of 12 million people from 183 countries, supported by a very special array of literary and literacy friends. This is our third festival, offering us the opportunity to celebrate the written word, to learn about the outstanding work of local charities, and to spend time with our fellow book lovers. I'm delighted that so many of you have joined us this evening at Chatsworth. Writers, actors, publishers, and of course readers. In fact, everybody involved in the wonderful world of books. Without you all, we wouldn't be here, so thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I know we have plenty of treats in store. I shall therefore stop in case William feels the need to interrupt me with a sardonic, "You have delighted us long enough." Thank you.
Lord Burlington, Your Majesty, my name is Gyles Brandreth. I'm one of the trustees of the Queen's Reading Room, and I want to begin by thanking Lord Burlington for making this amazing space available to us. It's incredible. I'm a bit of an enthusiast for teddy bears, and I worshipped Lord Burlington's grandmother, the Duchess of Devonshire, who was, for some years, she looked after the teddy bear belonging to John Betjeman, Aloysius, the one that features in Brideshead Revisited. So I'm thrilled to be with you, and if I may, at one remove, I'd now like to sort of touch your garb. Is that okay? A little bit of magic for me. Your Majesty, the Queen's Reading Room is something so special, so extraordinary, so important. We are thrilled that you founded this charity. We are thrilled that this is making such a difference in the lives of real people, wonderful people who've come here to celebrate their books, their writing, their work, the films of their books, etc., and all the people who are going to come tomorrow to hear the talks. But also people in refuges, in shelters, in prisons, who are having books made accessible to them, and we're already finding that actually by having a book, it makes a difference. Even to somebody in a refuge who's got so many other problems in their life, having a book to escape into, to find security in, is a wonderful thing. So this is a charity that is touching the lives of anybody and everybody. Whether you're a child or a grandee, whether you're somebody whose life has been very rough for you, books can make a difference. And we're so thrilled that you haven't just lent your name to it, you are actively so involved. So thank you very much on behalf of one and all. I'm not going to go on wearing this jumper because when His Majesty saw me wearing it, he said to me, "I think you're rather more effective as a hearthrug, don't you?" So I'm taking it off, but for a reason. Lord Burlington decided that we should, when we're going to do our little talk about Jane Austen, do it halfway down the stairs. And that made me think, do you remember halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit? There isn't any other stair quite like it. It's not at the bottom, it's not at the top. But this is the stair where we always stop. A.A. Milne wrote those lines. There's a little touch of A.A. Milne here. But that's for another day to talk about A.A. Milne. We're going to talk about another writer who wrote so beautifully in the English language, who for me is, after Shakespeare, our greatest writer. And who isn't just a novelist, but is somebody who is more than a novelist, because she does everything. She tells a story, she creates a world, she makes us think, she moves us, she makes us laugh, but she gives us real people seen in the round. I want to know more about her. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get the president of the Jane Austen Society along? And even better, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get that lady along who wrote that brilliant book that introduced our grandchildren to the story of Jane Austen? And then I thought, oh, this summer I loved watching, well, earlier this year, Miss Austen on television. I thought it was, I adore Keeley Hawes anyway. Could we get those three people to form a panel? So we wrote to those three people, and we got one reply from the same person. Would you please welcome the biographer of Jane Austen, the person who knows more about Jane Austen because she is the president of the society, and the person who has written three, I think they're called adjacent Austen novels, aren't they, in the modern parlance. Nobody knows more, and nobody is more brilliant than Gill Hornby. As we mount the stairs, it's rather like getting married, isn't it? It's quite exciting, that.
It is.
But as we descend, it's rather like going to the funeral, so let's hope it goes well. What I want to begin with, really, is asking you, 250 years on, why is Jane Austen still so special to us? Can you define the magic of Jane Austen?
Well, she can turn a sentence like probably nobody else before or since. She is the most brilliant analyst of the human character and mind. She is incredibly funny, which an awful lot of serious novelists forget, that comedy is absolutely part of the morph of human life. And she wrote on a small scale. Walter Scott, who was her contemporary, who was outselling her by squillions, and who she resented enormously, said, she could do the miniature like nobody else. He could do the big bow wow. And the big bow wow was making him a fortune. But no other generation wants another generation's big bow wow. It doesn't mean anything to us. Whereas she was writing about what it's like to have a mother and a sister and to fall in love and how annoying the neighbors are. And these are all absolute constants in our existence. And she has as much to tell us now as she had to tell her readers then.
And has she proved over the years more popular with women than men because of that background you just described, or not?
Well, it's very interesting because at the time, her contemporary readers were completely men and women equal, and possibly even more men. But it's fallen off. Her fame has gone like this. It's been absolute snakes and ladders. Before her horribly early death, she was witnessing her own professional demise. Her sales were dropping off. She was losing money. She could feel it all slipping away. And then she disappeared after her own death, and then she started to build in late Victorian times. And interestingly, one of the real injections into her success came in 1914, where the men in the trenches were just crying out for Austen novels. Everyone was sending home saying, can you send me more of this stuff? Because it was about their concepts of England. The same thing happened in the Second World War. So that's men. Now it seems to be packaged and read entirely as chick lit. Is it Jane's fault or is it men's fault?
When you say about the First World War, it's extraordinary. Am I right that in the 1920s, Rudyard Kipling coined the word Janeite?
He did, yeah.
When writing about the phenomenon of men, just ordinary men, not the officers, men wanting Jane Austen novels, facing the horrors of the Great War.
Yes, it's really
It's a phenomenon.
touching. It's really
Is it
touching.
also true, you talk about her decline during her lifetime, is it so that she never saw her own name on the title page of any one of her 6 published books during her life?
Absolutely, but that was her choice. After she died, Cassandra, her sister, who was her literary executor, published Persuasion and Northanger Abbey in 1 volume under her name, and that was the first time, her identity was properly blown. But she really didn't want... Fame was abhorrent to her. I think it's one of the most interesting things about her, and who knows how much that contributes to the success of the current brand, is that she just wasn't putting herself out there. She never met another writer. She met with her publisher once, and only because her brother was ill. She never went to a literary party. She didn't tell the neighbors or half of her family that she was the author. There's a story about her 16-year-old nephew, who she was very fond of, who was at Winchester College, and he just read Pride and Prejudice, and after a bit, somebody blew the secret, and she was in constant communication with him. He wrote quite a funny poem about it, saying the shock of finding that his Aunt Jane had written this was like being a stuck pig, a pig that had been stuck by a farmer. He was so shocked by the fact that his Aunt Jane, Mrs. Little dreary woman in the cottage, had knocked off
Unpack
this.
that. Try and explain to us the psychology of why she would want no one really to know.
Well, I think it's always hard to untangle a person's character from their age, actually. And so who knows now, perhaps if she was doing what she's doing now, she might be sort of tarting herself around Hollywood and going on every chat show. I kind of doubt it. She was very socially awkward. But she was essentially a vicar's daughter, and fame was just a repulsive idea. Celebrity is a terrible idea. She was really serious about her own writing. The family, after she was dead, kind of put out this sort of mythology that she sort of wrote these books of genius by accident. She only meant to entertain the family, and it was just a little bit of fun. She was really serious. She had read constantly since she was 7. She was a better literary critic than anybody else alive. She knew the state of the modern novel at that point backwards. And she knew she was better than everybody else. She wasn't doing better, I mean, absolutely not. But she knew she was better than everybody else. And she wanted money, because she didn't have any. And that money would be really jolly nice. And she wanted enormous success for her novels, which she knew were terrific. But it didn't, who she was, it really didn't matter. And the fact that Cassandra protected her, or so much of her identity after her death, is the reason Cassandra was so loathed, but actually she was entirely acting in accordance with her sister's wishes.
We, though, are intrigued about who she was.
Of course we are.
So
do we actually have a right to know? Do you know what I mean? I mean, the sort of biographies community hatred of Cassandra for burning so many letters is quite interesting.
How many letters did she burn? There was a whole...
Well, we can't know because they've gone. She left 161, but they'd been writing to one another since Jane was 17, the first time they were separated.
And Cassandra's a couple of years older.
3 years older, yes. But it's not just Cassandra, because she had 6 brothers. You know, we've got about 3 of theirs. And there were various friends who don't have any of theirs. So it's not just Cassandra, actually. Nobody treasured them. Cassandra was the only one who treasured them enough to keep some. So actually, it really should be, the attack should be on everybody else. But it's true of nearly all women, and that's why it's so hard to do women's history, because we just don't have the relics of women's lives.
Can you tell us anything about her childhood? All I know is those very amusing stories that were published a few years ago, her childhood stories, which were swashbuckling pirate tales.
Yeah, they're all quite nuts.
Do we know how that came up? What sort of a little girl was she? Have you any idea?
She was very shy, she was very quiet. I mean, she was the 7th child of 8, and she was, her father was a vicar, a scholar, something close to genius, actually. I mean, at Oxford, he'd been incredibly respected in theology and classics. Her mother was slightly more aristocratic than her father, who'd been kind of orphaned when young, and probably was very bright, quite annoying, as mothers are, but very bright. And they were sort of it was the perfect test tube, really, to create this person. There was 8 of them. One brother was handicapped and disabled and lived outside of the family.
That was a normal thing to be done?
To put it out, yes. And I mean, they had 7 other children, and it was not a big house. And George Austen was running a school in the attic.
So just this child, the member of the family, is looked after by a local farmer? What happens?
No, a relative.
A relative.
Yes.
And there's another, and that was a brother, was it?
Yes.
And there's the other brother who is adopted by the childless grand family nearby. Explain that to us.
I mean, they were an amazing family, really, when you look at them. So they were all sort of going to Oxford. They were brilliant, like their father, apart from Edward, who was very charming and good-looking, but probably wasn't going to cut it in any kind of way or profession. They had to make their way, you know, those boys, which they did as doctors and lawyers and sailors and things. And then Edward, when he was 12, these relatives came along on their honeymoon tour, and Edward was very charming and sucky-uppy, probably. And they said, oh, you know, we do like your 12-year-old boy. We'd like to take him on honeymoon with us. And they said, oh, yes, certainly. And off he went.
This is pre-safeguarding, isn't it, clearly?
Pre-Esther Ranson. And off he went for 3 months. And then they came...
And what sort of relatives were they? They were cousins of some kind?
Kinsmen, rich ones.
Kinsmen.
Rich ones.
But that's the point.
That's
Very
the
rich
point.
ones.
They wouldn't have been given to any old cousin.
And this is a family called Knight.
It is. And then they came back 4 years later saying, we haven't had any children. He was gay, clearly. We haven't had any children, so can we have that one? And Mr. Austen, he was quite kind of soppy. He said, absolutely not. You know, he's our boy. And Mrs. Austen said, I think you better let him go.
May I just interrupt?
So he
it's a bit harsh. The Reverend Austen saying, no. He must have been, in some ways, heartbroken.
He was heartbroken.
Yeah.
He was heartbroken, but also not that heartbroken because he got an estate in Kent and an estate in Hampshire, so he was only marginally heartbroken because it was from that that Jane found her way into a country house.
Yeah.
I mean, she'd been in country houses before for balls, but with that, she was there for breakfast, and she was there when they came in from hunting, and she was able to curl up. And that sort of diurnal rhythm of a country house that you get in, say, Mansfield Park, all of that piece of trance for Edward's completely informed the novels.
Because I seem to remember that Edward comes into something like 5,000 a year as Edward Knight, when you think that Darcy, who is fabulously wealthy, is on 10,000 a year. So
yeah, Mr. Bingley's got 5, and they're all mad about him.
Absolutely. So it's a move to a different world, and that gives her access to that world.
Yes, it does. And it gives her absolutely bugger all else, really, until his wife has died. Because, so Jane had this,
Edward's wife.
So Jane had this really lovely, cosy, happy childhood in Hampshire, where she grew as a kind of brain. There was a schoolroom running upstairs by her father. The girls weren't educated, but somehow by osmosis, they became educated because it was such kind of learned household. And because the Georgians were very indulgent parents, and they were very sort of freewheeling, and they loved their kids and loved their daughters, actually. And Jane was just allowed to curl up in the library from the age of 7 and read any old stuff. And novels were very racy in those days. There was all sorts of stuff going on. And she, you know, a Victorian father wouldn't have let her do that. But she was able to just sort of imbibe all of it.
You say this. Do we know the sort of book she was reading?
Yes, it's all of that. Gothic tied up in castles and being rescued and all of that, you know, kidnapped and highwaymen.
The sort of thing that gives you Northanger Abbey.
Exactly,
those kind of...
a lot of that, but so the cheaper version as well, which was quite
I mean, the John Cleland... not quite going that far.
Because, you know, they were a very... As a family, they read anything and did anything. They put on plays, which in Mansfield Park is terribly frowned upon, but they put on plays in the barn every Christmas, which sometimes they wrote, or, you know, and they danced. They pushed back the chairs and danced. It was a fun family. And then when she was 22 and just getting into her stride, she'd just written the first draft of Pride and Prejudice. Her father said, right, off, we're off. I'm retiring, we're going to Bath, and we're giving your brother our vicarage. And she was so upset, she just fainted clear away.
And literally fainted to the ground.
Yeah, she did, on the doorstep. And then they were in Bath for 4 years. The idea was that he'd been working incredibly hard, they'd run this huge family, and now it was time to have some fun. I think also there must have been in the back of their mind, all the boys are settled. We've got these 2 blooming girls who we still haven't married off. If we drag them around the assembly rooms 10,000 times in Bath, surely somebody will take them off our hands. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, mostly because Jane sort of flew into a sulk because she hated Bath so much. It's quite funny, the fuss that Bath makes about its association with Austen, because she really didn't like it at all.
But it, again, was an opportunity for her to see things that she couldn't write about.
Absolutely. No, it was a very, very useful place for her to be. But she was very unhappy there. And then when her father died, and his pension died with him, they were suddenly 3 ladies, the mother and Jane and Cassandra, slightly on their uppers, and in rented accommodation, shuffling around the country for 4 years. And it could have been that the minute their father died, rich Edward, the adopted son with his 40 cottages in Hampshire and his 40 cottages in Kent, could have said to his mother and 2 sisters, have a cottage. But he didn't. And then when his wife died in childbirth 4 years later, he said, have a cottage. And if you look back at the beginning of Sense and Sensibility, which is all about the women folk having been left a cottage by the father and and the furniture and the china and the linen, and then along comes a sister-in-law and says, "Oh, darling, they're only ladies. Why do they need a cottage? And if they don't have a cottage, why do they need a table? And if they don't have a table, then why do they need the linen?" And so on, and they end up with nothing, going off in a pony and trap with absolutely nothing. That is clearly an autobiographical way of, her expressing her frustration at how long it took them to house the women.
A lot of modern people would think of her as a romantic novelist. Others think of her as a satirical novelist. If we take her as a romantic novelist, where does she learn all that she clearly knew about romance and burgeoning love?
Well, she lived in this very big family. I mean, she was one of 8 children, and the boys got married, and then she had 24 nieces and nephews.
Oh.
There was quite a lot of carrying on in that direction. And she lived in a village, and that was not people talk about her sheltered upbringing. Village life in the 18th and 19th century wasn't sheltered. She, as a vicar's daughter, she visited the poor all the time. As a respected vicar's daughter, they were invited into big houses, for balls and dinners and things. You're not cut off into hierarchies of village
Did she
life.
ever receive a proposal?
Oh, allegedly. I don't really believe it.
This is
Certainly
the man,
nobody ever fell in love with her.
the man called Lefroy, is that the man?
Oh, Lefroy didn't even get near it. I mean, that's just a nonsense. That's the first time that Cassandra and...
Just trying to get the goss in when we can.
Well, Giles, I'm giving it to you. There's nothing there. It was... Cassandra was away for the first time, and this boy, a neighbour's nephew, came into the neighbourhood. He lasted 6 days. And she flirted with him, and he flirted with her, and she wrote one letter to Cassandra about it. And on the basis of that, books have been written and films have been made about this romance. 6 days, 17 years old. Never saw him again. It really, really doesn't class as a romance. Not even a holiday romance. It's not even quite long enough to be one of those. So no, and never in a million years would it. He was 21 and far from being established, and it would just never have happened. There was another alleged proposal, which I put in Miss Austen because it suited my narrative structure, but I'm not terribly sure I believe it, whereby she was staying with friends, and their rather kind of almost idiotic younger brother proposed to her after dinner, and because he had a nice house and they were desperate, she said yes. And then she and Cassandra stayed up all night talking, saying, what on earth have you done? And then they just did a run the next morning. But I'm not quite sure. I think that's more mischief-making by one of her vile sisters-in-law.
What I'm interested in is you're giving me a picture of somebody who's observing a great deal, but is quite shy personally, and clearly in the area of love does not have a lot of experience. And yet when we read these novels, we feel, my God, she knows what's happening. She understands. 2 people come into the room. She knows how different the man is from the woman. And you're telling me this wasn't from personal experience, it is the observation of others.
Well, she knew a lot of men, and she's very, very aware of the difference between men and women. We are reading the books very differently from the contemporary reader. Really, we are. Especially, for example, Pride and Prejudice. That we open it and it says, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet entailed estate. What's that? I don't even know what that means. 5 daughters. Oh, this sounds amusing. Your sort of housewife in 1815 would have opened it and thought, oh my God, that poor woman, an entailed estate and 5 daughters. It's your basic nightmare. What on earth is she going to do? And so they're kind of reading like this. These girls are in peril. They are in real peril. Jane tells us, what can you do if you don't get married? Mr. Bennet drops dead. That's it. They're all out on their rear because Mr. Collins will move in and has he doesn't have to keep them there. So they will all be homeless. There's no extra money. What can you do as a woman? You can get married. If you fail to do that, you can become a governess. After that, it's companion to an elderly lady. George Austen, the father's sister, ended up being trained as a milliner. That's 16 hours work going like this in the dark. Terrible. Below that, there's prostitution. That's how it goes, the kind of marble run of social decline for women. And what Jane is telling us is she tells us that the Bennet girls have not been educated. Their mother educated them, and we know she's a bit daft. So they wouldn't be governesses. We can quite clearly see that Kitty and Lydia would end up prostitutes. And would Lizzie be a very good companion to an elderly lady? I can't quite see it. So they are in massive trouble. And the heroine of that book is Mrs. Bennet, She gets the problem at the beginning and she solved it at the end. Hooray, that's how it looks in 1815, 1813. Mr. Bennet is a feckless, ghastly, blooming, awful, useless husband and father, sitting in the library, quaffing away, not caring a damn about them. And Jane, being Jane and complicated, always muddying the waters, gives him 2 of the best lines in English literature, and then he's always played by a twinkly actor. And so we all go really weak at the knees. And he's awful, he's a villain.
Gosh, you're rewriting one of our favourite novels.
I'm not, absolutely not. I'm absolutely not rewriting it. I'm just telling you.
You're giving it to us as maybe we would have looked at it with eyes from that period.
Exactly. And so they're not just romantic comedies, they are stories of deliverance. Marriage is what saves all of the Austen heroines. They are all saved from penury and trials and tribulations, apart from Emma, who doesn't face any of those things, but she's saved from her own self. She becomes a better person because of
these trials and tribulations are at a domestic level, because as a novelist, other novelists, Thackeray, Tolstoy, Dickens, they give us what's going on in the real world. They give us the Napoleonic Wars. They give us battles, horrors, famine. We get, I think, a passing reference to the slave trade, but she doesn't deal with what's going on in the outside world. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I think what matters the Napoleonic War or the slave trade or any of the rest of it if you don't have a roof over your head? I think her point is that here are these girls, and they are in jeopardy, and they need to be saved. And this is the problem of being a woman in the 19th century. That's what she's talking to us about. Again, the evidence is littered all over the place. The war's all over Pride and Prejudice. Everyone's in uniform. It's all marching bands. It's these dissolute soldiers. They've all landed in Brighton, blah, 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 blah. Again, your contemporary reader saw all that. So many of the things that we need pointing out to us, they didn't need it. For example, there's so many motherless people in Austen because nearly all mothers died in childbirth. But she doesn't tell us that they died in childbirth because she didn't need to, because everybody died in childbirth. It was kind of practically, it was just a cliche. So everybody knew where the mothers had gone. So all of that kind of stuff, it is all there. She is dealing with the gritty side of the 19th century. She's just not sort of got out her highlighter pen.
Now explain this expression that you gave me about being an adjacent Austen writer. What does that mean?
I think it goes Austen adjacent, but anyway.
Austen adjacent. That means Austen is here, adjacent to it is you.
No, I think it means, because a lot of people write sequels to her novels, about Mrs. Bennet or Mrs. Collins or whatever, that sort of thing. There's quite a lot of that sort of stuff, and people write imaginary novels with Austen in, but the novels I've been writing are about her family, which, as I say, is huge. These 8 children that become the 22 that become actually even more, about 60 as the next generation. And in all of that, in that whole lineage, I can find all of the things that Jane is actually talking about in her novels, but not underlining. For example, the women dying in childbirth, the compromises in marriage, the power differences between men and women, the terrors of economic, financial insecurity, the importance of a roof over your head, the comforts of being a spinster, for example.
Do you do it in her style? Do you try to echo her voice?
I do. I sort of meet her halfway, I think. I think in her voice would be a bit inaccessible, and it's a bit pointless writing an inaccessible novel if you want to sell a copy. So I probably go back halfway, just kind of slightly post Mrs. Gaskell, kind of, probably is where I land.
We call her Elizabeth now, but we'll let you get away with that.
Sorry. Yeah,
we're
jumped
right on.
into me as a child.
Yeah. So, 250 years from now, she's survived 250 years. She's now riding so high. I mean, there are Jane Austen horror movies, isn't there? I mean, there's Bride and Prejudice, because that's an Indian version of it. There's
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Huge. That's a franchise, isn't it? I mean, several of those.
Yeah,
what is the reason for that?
Oh, because the plots are perfect. They are the perfect They are just the perfect rom-com plots. I don't think she saw her books as rom-coms at all, but they are the perfect rom-com plots. And, you know, we have to say that part of her longevity, as I'm afraid not her brilliant prose style or anything, is just her extraordinary, freakish adaptability to the screen, which I don't think anybody else has ever matched. And that just seems to be going on and on. So all of these super fans that have been flocking Bath this week and all the rest of it, I'm not quite sure how many of them have actually engaged with the text. It's so much more, you know, Colin fans versus Matthew fans and that sort of thing. But that's really, really kept her going. Would we still all be reading her and talking about her if we didn't have these fabulous movies? I don't know.
Well, you had a fabulous TV series. It's wonderful, Miss Austen. And there's going to be a sequel?
Yes, the book I had out this summer, The Elopement, has been bought because it's got Keeley Hawes can come back
Keeley
again.
Hawes.
We love Keeley Hawes.
Now, she wouldn't come here. Jane Austen, no, Keeley Hawes will be arriving later. But Jane Austen, you've told us, would not be wanting to come to this party. But we would love her to be here, wouldn't we? Would we like her, though? How would she be to relate to?
Awkward, tricky, very tricky. It's one of the reasons she wasn't successful with men. I mean, apart from the fact she was quite plain and she didn't have a penny to her name and that kind of stuff. But she had that terrible curse of a sort of social X-ray vision, so she could look through a person the minute she met them. Oh. You know, men aren't mad about that. And
no, certainly aren't.
They really weren't mad about it in the 19th century. And that did sort of scupper her choices. There's a letter to Cassandra where she was caught in the library with some boring old man before dinner at her rich brother's house. And she said, you know, God, I really tried. I just really, really tried to be nice and charming. And I was really holding my tongue. And then at the end, it just sort of burst out. I said something really, you know, I shouldn't have done, really mean and rude and all the rest of it. So she was quite hard. She wasn't great at, I'm sure she'd have loved us, though, don't you?
Is it a pointless game to think which of the Bennet sisters is she most like, or which character in the novels is she most like?
Yes, I think it is totally pointless. I think they are... Sorry.
No, it's fine.
No offence.
I set it up. We'll still be playing it, but nonetheless.
No, I think she invented everybody. You can't really trace even, you know, her family members or anything in it. So, no, she was working from her imagination.
Extraordinary.
She was quite clever.
Clearly, more than clever, clearly of genius level. Do you have a favourite novel? Do you have a favourite character?
At the moment, Emma's my favourite novel. I mean, when I was younger, it was Pride and Prejudice, then I turned into an old bat, it was Persuasion. But recently, I've gone back to Emma, and I have to say that I love it on so many levels. I love it because of how she was clearly when she wrote it. It was 1815, they'd had their cottage in Chawton for 4 years. She now was a published author. Imagine somebody like Jane Austen being a published author, and she had 3 novels under her belt, and she felt well. And they'd had this sort of 5 years of security in their house with Cassandra and the mother and their best friend Martha, and she was happy, and she was energetic, and she was at the top of her tree. And it was the first time. All of her books had been imitative before that, but this one, she just throws all that away and she just blows the walls off the novel form in Emma. She invents this thing called free and direct speech, which is now second nature to all writers and all readers. None of us even think about it. But she invented it in Emma in that she puts aside the moral authorial voice that people had always used in novels. She's not telling us what is right and what is wrong. It's third person, but in Emma's head. So we're in Emma's head all the way through from the beginning, and we're so in Emma's head that we lose all critical judgment, you know. So we trot along thinking, oh, she's perfectly nice, she's very nice to her dad, and she's very nice to her sister, and she's a very good neighbour, and so on. And then it's sort of, we're kind of a third of the way in, you think, whoa, Emma, that is really not okay, as my children would say. And it's the first time anybody's fiddled with that sort of form, and she just invented it herself. And she wrote it in a year. It's a perfect novel, longhand. And then after that, she just started to get ill. And 2 years later, 18 months later, she was dead. You know, Persuasion is a masterpiece, but it's a flawed masterpiece. Whereas Emma is just simply perfection.
And Emma contains the two most alarming words almost in English literature, doesn't it? Badly done.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, whenever I hear that, badly done, that's just
Can you imagine? And from Mr. Knightley of all people.
I know. Yeah, it's a couple of words that my wife has used many times over the years. But it really does alarm you. So tell us about her at the very end. It's a sad end, she and Cassandra together at the very end.
Well, it is a sad end because she's only 41.
Oh.
And, I mean, the horrors of that time is the lack of medicine, isn't it? So she had this curious thing going on with her for a year, and sometimes she'd relapse and sometimes she'd get better. Her skin was all terrible, she was weak, but there was no name to it, no doctor could explain it. And leaving, Cassandra wouldn't take no for an answer and took her to Cheltenham and took her all over the place, and in the end found this doctor, total fraud in Winchester, who said he could cure her. And they left Chawton in a pony trap and went down to took rooms in College Street. And 6 weeks later, she died in Cassandra's arms. It was terrible. They were such a long-lived family, the Austens. They all lived into their 90s, apart from her.
Do we know from her letters to Cassandra if she was happy in her achievement, happy with her work, with her endeavour?
Yes. No, I think we completely know that she was incredibly, she called them her own darling children, her novels. And she was happy in her personal life. She lived in a house with her beloved sister, her mother, and her best friend. There wasn't a man coming in demanding dinner on the table or anything. They had a pittance, but it was enough of a pittance, and she wrote, and Cassandra was to her as, you know, a great man's wife is to a great man. You know, you sit there, you write, I'll do everything. My God, this is genius. She read it aloud to the household every night. It was absolutely the best happiness that Austen could possibly have hoped for.
It's good to end on a happy note. Do you have a line that is your favourite line that comes into your head again and again, an Austen line?
Well, my favourite ones actually are from the novels, from the letters, I'd say. Let other pens dwell on guilt and misery.
Say it again.
Let other pens dwell on guilt and misery. I like that one. And another thing I think pretty much every day when I'm trying to shirk work is, I am not in the mood for writing. I must write on till I am.
Oh. Well, we're not in the mood for writing, we're in the mood for drinking. So we're going to go into another room. But I'm glad you ended on a note of happiness. Gill, thank you so much. Brilliant. You're wonderful. Gill Hornby. Thank you. Fabulous.